Hello, my name is Alex. I am a member of a very old government that used to exist at some point in the past. We had to disband and undergo a lawsuit that I have managed to recover from. And to tell you a little bit about our ancient forgotten civilization, we are not exactly taught in history books. Some people are trying to point me in the direction of Neanderthals. So, in a way, we predate the humans. I guess you could say that. We weren't exactly human. We were strong believers in DNA modification technology. We were able to modify how we looked from a very early age. We would start from the incubators. We did not believe in giving birth to people through mothers and fathers or through the conservative ways. We were strong believers in science and scientific engineering. And most of our children grew up with the ability to modify the way their hair looked, the way the eyes looked, the way they physically looked. They could implement natural forms of steroids, modify their fat content, their height, the size of their breasts, and their pubic organs. They could modify almost anything, even the color of their skin. So people could change from being a Caucasian to someone who would look completely like an African or an Indian. And this technology was around, and unfortunately, this technology is now cancelled or exterminated for some unknown reason, which is very sad, because when I was growing up, I always wanted to modify the way I looked, and this is probably not the body that I have envisioned. Our country was more of a federal government, and we used to govern multiple nations like the EU or USSR, or even like the federal government of United States. We didn't really force people into anything. They still maintain their own governments, like in the states or the provinces. For example, in Canada, there are state governments or the federal governments, and then there are the provincial governments. And I think in the United States there are similar methods. There are state governments, and then there's the Fed. And my country acted as the Fed for a very, very large number of nations in the past. We had our own reserve currency, and this currency was very popular at the time. We were strong believers in gold, silver, platinum, and precious gems. We needed all of these because our population was much larger than it is currently in this century. You might think that 7.5 billion people is a very large population, but I have a surprise for you. We had about 300 to 450 billion people just in our union, just in my country alone. So the overall number of people on the planet was probably somewhere around 600 billion people at the time. And that's food for the thought to some people. You might think that we don't have enough water, or that we are going to pollute the planet and destroy the civilization with an increase in population, but that's all lies. And obviously, in order to maintain that kind of reserve currency that is backed by hard metals and precious gems, you would need a lot of raw materials to scale or to value the currency. So gold alone was not enough for us, and we reserved various forms of precious gems like rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds. We obviously reserved platinum, and platinum I'll probably not discuss in this video. Maybe I'll make a separate video on platinum alone. We obviously had a lot of silver and a lot of gold. We had free education from an early birth. Most people started school with free mandatory education in business, accounting, and law. We were strong believers in international law, and by the time our children reached 12th grade, they probably had a very good understanding of how the international law works. And on top of that, they would be able to continue this education through the bachelor's, master's degree, and even PhD in law. We were very strong believers in international law, and that's probably enough about our education program. We obviously had a paid universities and paid private high schools and even paid kindergartens for the ultra wealthy, and they were very competitive with modern day Harvard, that has a high school, I believe, and even Oxford University. So we were very competitive, very, very competitive nation. We were similar to Switzerland in our belief that most of our citizens had to undergo a military education from an early birth. Our citizens had the ability to hold guns, automatic machine guns, grenades, and even rocket launchers in their homes solely through the international law. We are strong believers in the Second Amendment, like the United States of America. You can obviously tell that our people were incredibly wealthy for their period of time, and we always lived in fear of being invaded, so things like Second Amendment were essential to our nation. And each and every one of our citizens had the ability to hold arms. We obviously didn't let them walk around with handguns and grenades or even rocket launchers. That was probably illegal. But I know for a fact that our people had a standing army and a militia group in case we were to be invaded by someone from the outside. Like the United States of America originally were, we were strong believers in small business economy. Our banks didn't give people loans. It was more of a investment opportunity, and we would teach people how to do business from an early age. I already told you that we had a mandatory business education from the first grade. So our people knew exactly how to do business, and by the time they would graduate, they would have the ability to take out a investment from the government. And if they were to fail for some unknown reason, then we would not hold it against them and demand that money back. This money was completely free, and our government was able to maintain a very strong small business economy. We were able to accomplish this by controlling the raw resources and the parts that people use to manufacture their own items. We didn't extend better business deals to bigger businesses, and we did have some really, really powerful and big industries in our era. So even someone from a really small business with only 10 people could get the same business transaction as someone who would ideally have about 1 million people working for them. There was no price difference. We would not allow rich people to make better deals than the small business owners because we wanted to preserve the small business economy. And this is probably the problem with North American business model right now. A lot of people are complaining that they can't compete with organizations like Walmart or Zellers. If you are from Canada and you've heard this brand before, it was a really major warehouse that had a lot of goods that were probably imported from all over the planet. These kinds of businesses are very harmful to the small business economy, and we've decided to embrace the small business owners instead of the major players that could afford to invest billions of dollars into their business. We had our own religion. That was my religion. I personally created this religion. We were worshiping animals and plants, and we were strong believers in reincarnation. and that people eventually all turn into animals, trees, birds, fish, insects, reptiles, and some forms of flowers. And we wanted to respect their rights when they were in their animal forms or even plant forms, and we would periodically modify the nature in order to make their lives a little better. And this was a pretty powerful religion at the time. I don't really see this today. I've seen some pretty horrible videos about how they treat animals in farms and even straight from the ocean. Just recently I saw the video of a form of amphibia being eaten alive while it still moved. Someone would cut its tail out and literally eat the animal while it was still moving. And we find this to be very serious. We obviously didn't have that at our time period, and this was practically illegal. We would sue someone for doing this. It was our idea that this was murder when you would cut down a tree or kill an animal. It was very similar to how we would view someone killing a human being, and the sentences were pretty harsh too. They would probably start similar to your own sentences, from 14 years in prison to maybe as high as 20 or even 30 years in prison, depending on the severity of the murder, because eating someone alive while they move is probably very close to torture. And we took torture very, very seriously because it's the law. We were able to modify the DNA of our plants, trees, and even animals. Our animals were extinct. I don't really see any of our animals today, or even our plants. We had different varieties of trees and the flowers they grew. Everything looked very, very different. We were able to modify the way people looked, the way our nature looked, the way everything looked, really. We were very strong believers in DNA modification technology. We are probably going to make a separate video on alien civilizations. I know this is a pretty powerful topic in the 21st century, and a lot of people believe that they saw aliens. They probably did not see any aliens. I probably disagree with that view. That's probably a bunch of lies, because we created the alien civilizations, and I'm gonna make a separate video on this level of diversity and globalization. We practically created aliens by just modifying human individuals, by modifying their DNA and letting them create their own forms of beauty and artistic design. They were probably pretty similar to the Mass Effect 3, if you ever come across this game. They were really good looking aliens, nothing like the Martians or the long-armed and long-legged creatures that they show in America today. Completely disgusting. We would never permit someone to be born with that kind of features. That would probably be illegal, because it would hurt the human being that decided to modify their DNA in such a way. We were very strong believers in beauty, and we would always want people to enjoy what they've created, and it was completely controlled. So aliens are just a form of DNA modification that surpassed what we would call human life. And we obviously created a lot of legally binding contracts to make sure that it wouldn't harm the humans that decided to become aliens. And like I said, I'm gonna make a separate video that will discuss alien life and alien civilizations in general at some point in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.